Hi, this is Joshua Berry, author of Dare to Be Naive. And on my episode of the Business Growth Architect Show, we'll get into how to serve your customers better by challenging the assumptions and beliefs that might be holding you back from truly understanding what it is that they need. We'll also get into why it's good to be naive. If you want to figure out how to use your own naivete as your superpower, please join in and listen to the full episode.
And hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here. I am the host of the Business Growth Architect Show, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we discuss how to navigate strategy and spirituality to achieve time and financial freedom. Truly successful people have learned how to master both: a clear intention and a strategy to execute that in a spiritual practice that will help them to stay in alignment and on purpose. Please enjoy the show and listen to what our guest today has to say about this very topic. Hello and welcome back. Your host, Beate Gillette here. And today we're talking to Joshua Berry about Dare to Be Naive. And the whole conversation is going to be, what if your assumptions are all wrong and ego-driven? And what if there's a way better way to kind of crawl into the minds of your customers and give them exactly what they need? So Joshua, I'm excited that you're on our show. Welcome.
Thank you, Beate. It's a great opportunity to be with you.
So what does that mean, dare to be naive? I gotta ask you a simple question first.
It's a challenge because most people don't actually want to be naive. And yet when you truly get in and understand what it means to be naive, the world would be better if more people actually took that dare.
So let's dive right in then. So one of the things that I like about the work that you do and why I wanted you on the show is that there is a love affair that we as entrepreneurs, business builders, visionaries have, where we have this idea. And then we think that everybody else must love this idea just as much as we do. You're laughing. So if I say it like that, what comes up for you in your work? What have you learned?
The very first one is personal. There was a time in my life that I left my first big corporate job to pursue a startup idea. And we were pregnant with our fourth child and had just built a dream home. And we put it on the market so we could fund what the startup idea would be, and moved into a smaller home. And it was absolutely what you said, a solution that we thought was the best thing in the world, but really didn't take into account, does the world actually need this, right? The proverbial hammer chasing a nail. So not only do I have personal hurt and pain that comes from making those big assumptions, but also then all the work that we've done with hundreds of startups and corporate innovation teams has further cemented that the best innovators and the best entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs are those who first fall in love with the people they're serving and the problems they have, more so than their own ideas.
So let's talk about that. What does that mean, falling in love with the person that I'm serving? Because isn't this about me being the subject matter expert?
Sometimes it is about you. I think you do need to have a certain maybe insight at times into the market, or maybe something that could be translated into, the competitive advantage or the moat, if you will. But more often than not, it comes from finding some sort of insight or aha or something that a lot of times comes from empathy with another person. And so being able to understand maybe the problems or the ways that people are going about things and some of the issues that they have, sometimes even before they're aware of them, ultimately leads to things that could create greater sustainability and greater products for the world.
So one of the questions I have for you, which I think is really challenging, I mean, I see this in my work as a growth architect all the time, is that I know what the real problem is, but my customer cannot articulate the real problem because their understanding of the problem is a different kind. How do I maneuver that in this theory? Because, for example, somebody would say to me, Beate, I don't need all of the stuff that you do. I don't need growth architecture and I don't need to build a system. Just tell me how to find more clients, which is the understanding of their problem. But it really, all the other things, what do we tell our audience, the beehive? How do we manage that?
I think it is important to first start with where people are. right? And to understand if what they're saying is, I need more clients, they're not going to listen to you and all your expertise and you understanding what the true problem is until you acknowledge a lot of times that they have a problem that is real, right? A lot of people want to be heard. They want to be seen. Our defenses against marketing and sales are higher than ever right now. And so until I can first meet you with a lot of times a known or seen problem that you can experience or at least relate to, you're going to be a lot less open to hearing how I could potentially solve that. There's a hierarchy of sales where you go with people who don't even have a problem and you can create the problem for them, up to they have a problem and they're not aware of it. And then they have a problem and they are aware of it. You can absolutely work in those couple lower levels, especially people who have a problem but are not aware of it. But it's a very different type of market building and sales approach and requires a lot more marketing and sales dollars. You can almost liken it to trying to sell vitamins versus selling painkillers, right?
So now how does this tie back into the daring to be naive? Because to me, it almost feels like that, we talk about spirituality, we talk about how ego ties into some of these things. Is it that I really need to learn on how to take the ego that got me to do this in the first place, and that you got this, you can do this, and now I need to tone it down, and it's almost like I'm listening. I need to get myself more in a childlike state and say, but why is that? What is really going on? Am I understanding this right? Because I think there's a lot in there that we probably need to flush out for our listeners.
Yeah, you're right. It's a both and, as you just described there. And the way I even talk about naivete and the dare here is it's more a chosen naivete, which I describe as the third stage in life. Right? You have that childlike early curiosity and naivete. And then through school and work and people with louder microphones and society, you get told there's a way to do things and stay inside this box and do these things within the norm. This third stage is almost an integration of those last two. It's to say there are things that are critical and good and important that I can think through. And there are things that I absolutely do not know and that might actually be incapable of knowing. and when you are able to access this more chosen naivete side of things, you can start to say, okay, we know that these customers have this type of problem. What else is here? What else is my intuition telling me? What else are other faculties that I have at my availability telling me about the things that this group might need? Even the idea of I just might be wrong about the expertise that I have and that I brought into this particular conversation. And so you really do need to get to a spot where it's a both and, to your point, where you're using that ego that drives you to want to do better, to solve things. You're the best, you know it. And you realize that you don't know, and there's way more to know. And you can use that to tap into that curiosity and that commitment to learning.
You said something, Joshua, about intuition. So when I saw the word naive and naivety, it's not typically a word we see a lot used in business. And it leads me to believe that there is a spiritual, intuitive feeling type of component that you utilize or that you show how your clients to use. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because when we first spoke, you said you remembered the feeling when we had our pre-call to this interview. So that means that there's a reliance that you've developed on something. Can you share what that is?
Absolutely. To share that story, I'll go back to the research and interviews I was doing for the book by the name Dare to Be Naive. And when I went back to the patterns that I saw in extremely successful business leaders who are also using business for good, that was my specific area of interest. A handful of them would use the qualifier, this might sound naive, but... And then they would share an amazing idea or business strategy or whatnot. And that's what got me thinking, like, why are people so afraid of being seen as naive? What does it mean to actually be naive? And doing the digging and the etymology of that word, I learned that that word comes from nativus, from Latin, which means natural, genuine, authentic, or that thing which you had from the start. And so to be naive literally used to mean that you were just being authentic and genuine. without those things that continue to cloud it out. The subtitle of my book is How to Find Your True Self in a Noisy World. I think that naive voice that sometimes comes up inside of you, is sometimes residue or source or other things of something else that's always been there from the start, right? And so I found it just a fascinating contrast to most people thinking that being naive was being unsophisticated or unwisdomly. And yet it might actually be coming from a deeper wisdom that society needs to bring into better balance, I think, with our rational and ego mind.
It's so interesting sometimes when people never research the actual meaning of a word and then they use it. So it's almost like somebody says, "You were so naive." You should now say, "Well, thank you." And proudly so.
I'm being genuine. I'm being authentic, right?
I can't believe you recognized it so quickly. Well, gee, thanks. I like this a lot about the understanding to say, can I get myself to this non-judgmental state, which I think is what naive is commonly referred to. It's almost like a clean slate where you are looking at something and then people say, "Allow me to shed some light on what the reality of this is. This is not at all what you're thinking." So to say, I am putting myself in this naive, original state of not having all this bad stuff, I think is actually a powerful thought.
It is. And bringing it back to what we were discussing earlier with customers and needs and understanding marketplace, part of the practices that I invite people into is when you have an assumption about how something works, right? Customers buy this thing for this reason. Creating space for you to reflect back upon where do those assumptions come from? And the questions I use are where did that belief come from? Is it really true? And what do you gain and what do you lose by holding that belief? And those 4 questions really help us to start to almost take a step back and say, don't just go along with that person who's saying, "Oh, you don't know what reality is." We're all constantly shaping our own realities. And what we believe to be true about things is just our best guess at the reality that we see in front of us. So let's just skip ahead and acknowledge that and create some more space to be curious about maybe where those beliefs or ideas came from. And when you're able to make that space, you can then start to maybe dig in a little bit deeper, back to that, again, first example, into, well, what's actually happening here? And is there actually maybe an advantage or something else that other people have missed because they've just taken for granted or they've taken it as fact, everything that everybody else had already told them up to this point?
Are you finding that people have a hard time with allowing themselves to go there in the why questions? Because wouldn't it then open the door to insecurity, and wouldn't it open the door to second guessing? Is that the mindset to be in, or is the mindset to say, "I believe, build the field and they will come"?
So it could lead to insecurity. It could lead to that if you don't go all the way to the bottom of the turtles, if you could, right? If you go to a certain spot, you realize that no, there is no ultimate security into that, and there is no control that you're getting into. And I don't know, at a certain point, you're just able to then more freely be like, okay, now I'm going to go with this thing, right? And be able to hold that a little bit looser. And so I agree. If you're still stuck in I need to do this so I can get it right. Well, yeah, that's probably your first pass or two at this, but eventually I need to get it right. Where did you learn that belief? Is it really true? And what do you gain and what do you lose by holding that belief that you need to get it right? And I think this has taken me a long time to get to this space, because growing up, I was someone who prided myself on being the smartest in the room and being right. And I hated being seen as naive. And until I finally, I think, got to some of those bottoms and realized that I'm still here, it's okay, was I truly able to get to a spot where I could start to, maybe play at a different level.
I think that's very powerful because it allows you to then access a different part of yourself. Because I find that a lot of times it's almost like there's a brick layer sitting on top that people can't get through because it's a belief system that they're in. I was just visiting my mother in Germany, and it is amazing to me, now that I've been dealing with a lot of the trauma that came from that, But I have this curiosity, and maybe in your point, the naivety, to look at her and you say, what's really going on aside from the hurt and the whatever? But to say, wow, how interesting is that she's holding on to the same belief system that she had when she was 12 years old. She's almost 90. That is a long time to hold on to that exact set of belief systems. What do people get out of it when they hold on to something for so long? I mean, is that security, trust, safety? What are they searching for?
Yeah, likely. First, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that. And this is where it's, what do you gain? What do you lose? There's something that has kept your mom in that space. There's something that keeps me in the limiting beliefs that I have. And so step one is really being able to see some of those things, become aware of some of those things, to then decide if you want to shed any of those beliefs and try to sense a new reality or evolve through that. And you're not required to, just like your mom, like she's not required to have to move through any of those things. And yet it's almost, again, back to what we started with, of talking to customers and saying, oh, this is right for you. I know what's right for you, et cetera. People don't need to hear that. What they first need to have is to be seen. Be like, okay, your situation is real. That is your reality. That is where you're at. Let's talk about that. Let's understand that a little bit more. And from that then there oftentimes, even when you approach something of not wanting to change it, is sometimes where I see the most fertile ground for people being open to that change.
And we will dive right into that, into how to talk to your customers right after this quick message. Have you ever wondered what the actual amount of your true earning potential is in this market? To find out what your talent is worth, take our quiz at whatsyourtalentworth.com. You will find out your actual earning potential amount by using our proprietary profit formula. Enjoy the quiz, and again, the URL is whatsyourtalentworth.com. And welcome back. Beate here with Joshua, talking about how to be naive. So the next shift in our conversation is going to be, what does this have to do with our customers? I'm a business owner. I have my idea. I read your book. I listened to you. I'm learning that I need to challenge myself a little bit, that I need to ask myself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this for this person? What am I really solving? So help me to understand the process that you outline in your work on how can I do better?
Yeah. From a business systems perspective, I think it's important to understand that you have a lot of different ways that you go about your business, right? You have how you're doing marketing, you have how you do strategy, your structure, your communications, maybe your rewards or compensations. All these are different systems that are working within your organization or not working. Each one of those systems is prime for assumptions that you have. Right? How we do new product development, how we do compensation with our teams, et cetera. And all of those practices that you have in those systems are built upon certain principles, right? That you have, certain beliefs. How you can continue to take the framework and everything we've been talking about and applying them to whatever your goals are in your business is to start to understand which are the systems that are in most need of transformation within your culture, and then starting to be very intentional about what are the practices that we have there and what are the beliefs that underlie those practices. I'll give you an example from our own company around compensation. We had some work that we wanted to do. We're a certified B corporation, and so we're constantly working on ways that we can make sure that we're balancing the profits that we make with the impact that we're having on our people and the planet. And we chose a couple of years ago to focus on our compensation system and to find ways to continue to make that more equitable. We first started with, what are some of our practices? You know, we pay our client-facing consultants more than we pay our back office staff. Okay, that is a practice that we have. What are the principles that underlie that? And we invited our whole team into some of that. What beliefs do we have? And can we substantiate those beliefs? So, do we believe that client-facing people are worth more money or pay than, back office individuals? And it wasn't until we started to get into those to see, where do we believe? Where did those beliefs come from? Do we still believe those things? What do we gain and lose? That we were able to then start to clarify what it is that we believe, and then say, from those new beliefs, how might we want to practice something differently or experiment with something differently. And just to fast forward on our story, that led to us revisiting how we do our profit share system and changing that in a way that created a kind of a check or a balance to our traditional compensation system. It allowed us to create compensation ratios. So we were very transparent with, what lowest pay to highest pay or median to highest payer is. But it came from us identifying here's some of the systems that need to be evolved. And then what is it that we believe and how might we shift some of those things to be even more in alignment with who we say we are and what we believe. And it takes a level of naivete to be able to say that, because we absolutely shifted them into ways that do not look like how our peers practice business.
How did you get the awareness? Is this the result of personal work, self-development, lifelong quest? How do you get to the point where you allow yourself, because it has a certain level of vulnerability, if you really want to ask my opinion on this. I mean, I'm going to give it to you anyway. But but to say this is how we've done it, and we had good reasons to do it, but now I'm not so sure it's the right thing, and I'm going to go back and revisit it, and I'm going to even tell people we may have not gotten this right. That's a lot of vulnerability. That opens a lot of doors to a lot of other stuff that a lot of people wouldn't ever even want to get to. Why do you do that? Where's that coming from?
Great question. Some of it comes from my purpose in life is to create spaces for people to practice the behaviors that grow themselves and their companies. And therefore, this type of self-awareness, reflection, evolution, et cetera, are exactly the types of things that I think we need to have more of in society, right? The creating space for other people's beliefs and ideas and good dialogue between those things. I want to use work to be a place for people to practice those types of things that ultimately I think will lead to a better society. For myself, I think it has come through a lot of personal work and trying to understand what brings me contentment. I struggle so mightily with contentment and the ego-driven process. And so really starting to deconstruct that now 10, 11 years ago and identifying what some of those things are and how maybe I was creating my own suffering by holding on to this or to that. And I don't know, you know this, you've talked about this in your show. The more you keep peeling back, I don't know, it's interesting. The more you find how resilient you are and the more you find that it doesn't hurt anymore, but it's that you look at that hurt in maybe a different way if you're being vulnerable and putting something out there. Just this last week, I was informed one of our team members is leaving our company. And we'd been talking to her for about a year about what new opportunities might be. And it's going to be a huge loss to our organization. And yet we are celebrating her. And she came to us right away to talk about, this is the new opportunity that I'm going to have. By being vulnerable and being able to say, like, you know what, your goals actually are ahead of my goals for the company and wherever you're going. So please bring those, share those with me, is in some ways naive and counterintuitive. And it has led to a healthy system that we work in because we hear about it before somebody just like leaves us high and dry. She's going to
better than a 2-week notice.
Or no notice at all. In fact, she'll end up hanging on actually for a couple of months, helping transition some projects and whatnot. And we have stories like this of other individuals who they've left and then they've come back. And I don't know, it's some of that is also just work that we've had to do and I've had to do, and understanding that the game we're playing here is a lot bigger than just Econic and the company that I have and these team members. It's way more permeable than that.
I think that this is really one of the most important messages that I'm learning as I go deeper and deeper. I think there's a part where sometimes you look at people and they go like, well, they 60, they are now looking for retirement. They're sitting out the last couple of years and then get in an RV and drive around America, and that's the thing. And then there is us, and we go, oh, I still don't know so much. I need to work on my mindset. I choose to do things like ayahuasca or exploring psychedelics or a prayer or religion or spirituality in whatever capacity that is. And the only fear we have is that we're going to run out of time, which we are actually going to be right about, because we will be running out of time on regardless. But this drive, I think you hit this on the head. There is such a judgment, I think sometimes that we have, and I'm going to call you on that judgment, Joshua, toward yourself, because you cannot have that drive and then think that that just might be ego, because I disagree on that. I think that the drive is the inner purpose and not necessarily the ego. I mean, you can take credit for it. Why wouldn't you? I mean, it is amazing and it is outstanding and it's for the greater benefit of all. The why, the constantly asking the question, why am I doing this, is I'm following my purpose. That's a great why. But is the purpose and the ego separable in this instance? And as somebody who is a very strong alpha and generally struggles with the concept of this, like, how do you shift from this into the feminine divine and then kind of like do both? I mean, what? So I'm pushing boulders up the hill all day long, and then I'm gonna come home and wear white flowy dresses. How is that gonna work? I mean, there's so many stories around that. It's an evening full of entertainment. That was like it was an experience share, Joshua, that I did, where somebody says, "Well, what people tell us one thing that people don't know about you," and I said, "I cannot wear flower dresses because I feel completely out of place." And I admire women that can wear these like gorgeous flowery dresses. When I put one on, I'm cracking up. I'm sitting in my leather jacket, my jeans, my black leather belt, and I feel that that's kind of my thing. Then I ask why. Why is that? And part of it is because that is my brand and that is who I choose to be and that is how I do my best work. But then there's this longing for a flower dress in my future that I can wear without feeling awkward about it. We completely went off subject, but
Please check the show notes for
check the show notes, exactly.
for flower dress links. Yeah.
But I think that there really is a part to this where we have to give ourselves some grace too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, this life, this journey that we're in, to your point, is an ebb and flow of those things. And the sooner we can acknowledge that and start to work through any of that and just say, oh, and now this, oh, and this thing, and oh, I long for this, and why do I long for that? I don't know. It's one of my most favorite things in life is just exactly what you're talking about, the why in those pieces and catching yourself when you're unconscious to a number of those things. So
how do you give yourself grace?
That's a hard one. How do I give myself grace? It is prayer. It is meditation. I've had to work on this a lot because the productivity guilt is the big one that I'll call out of where I need grace the most. Am I doing enough? And I would say I'm able to give myself grace in those moments when I can stop. I mean, I'm looking out the window right now and the trees are blooming and there's 10 birds that are just like playing around over here. And when I can create space, because it doesn't just like stumble into it, when I create space just to be able to be like, okay, well then I don't know, I'm able to give myself a little bit more permission to kind of be in this moment and let some of those other voices in my head about productivity or doing things or showing up the right way or any of that stuff go. But it's not perfect yet.
Yeah, I love that a lot. I have an almost 8-month-old granddaughter, and this is really a practice for me, a spiritual practice now, where when I'm with her, I'm with her. There's no other thing. My whole purpose is just for that time to be fully present. And that is, I think, where we can give ourselves grace, and specifically making sure that our listeners are hearing that you can be driven and you can want something. That does not mean that you have to compromise on these spiritual principles, but you find them in those small moments of watching birds outside your office window.
Well said. Well said. I will repeat to people quite often, in the grand scheme of all space and time, like where's this thing going to matter and all of that. And so that's a reminder for it. The other piece that I would say is the epigraph to my book is especially important to me. And it says, love says, I am everything. Wisdom says, I am nothing. And between the two, my life flows, by Nisargadatta Maharaj. And that's it, right? Like, can I be this? Can I be that? And it's the dance between those two things all of the time. And that's the play. That's the play. So there you go.
I love that. So for somebody who's now listened to your interview, Joshua, and says, actually, I have to find out what the guy really does. What would you tell them and where will we send them?
Yes. You can send them to the book website is dareToBeNaive.com. It actually is a business book. It may not sound like that after all this, but it's a cover for all of the spirituality and other things that are obviously underneath of that. And the website for our company is econic.co. And we're coaches and facilitators who do culture and innovation change for companies.
Yes. So go all check this out. Joshua, this has been great. Ever since I've made these adjustments on the podcast, I have really no idea where these conversations are going. But I really enjoyed some of this. My personal takeaway on our interview really is that even someone like you struggles with giving yourself grace and still have that drive to do better and do more, and that there is an assumption that the ego might be involved when in reality, from what I see, it really is a sincere desire to help others succeed, which could be ego driven, but maybe isn't. So I find these conversations really fascinating because they now make me think about what do I do? How do I do it? And every interview I leave wanting to be better is a great interview. And in this case, you have fully succeeded. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for, the meandering journey. And again, check the show notes for some great deals on floral dresses. Okay.
Thank you so much. And that's it for us today. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. And for somebody who needs to listen to what we heard today, just send them the link, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. Thank you so much. So appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, a comment, and share this episode with one more person so that you can help us help more people. Thank you again. Until next time. Goodbye.